My name is Sergey, and 6 years ago I worked as a sales representative. My coverage area was huge, from the regional centre to godforsaken little villages 500 kilometers away. The car was my home, my office, and sometimes a coffin on wheels if I didn't change the tyres on time. That day was shitty. My last client in the village of Glubokoi dragged his feet, recounted the invoices, and then made me wait while his wife packed me some gifts to take home. I smiled politely, nodded, but kept glancing at my watch. I only left around 11 o'clock at night. I had 350 kilometers of highway ahead of me to get home, half of which was a wrecked dirt road through the forest. The navigator showed that if I drove without stopping, I'd be home by 3 in the morning. Normal. I started up my old but reliable station wagon, turned on the high beams, and plunged into the darkness. The first hour and a half, the road was bearable. Then the asphalt ended, and the dirt road began. My speed dropped to 40 kilometers an hour. The headlights only pulled dust out of the darkness, which immediately settled on the windshield and the white birch trunks along the roadside. The silence inside the cabin was muffled, just the hum of the engine and the rustle of gravel against the wheel wells. The radio had long since picked up only static. Somewhere in the middle of the journey, in the deepest wilderness, I suddenly noticed a light ahead. Not the headlights of an oncoming car, but a dim, flickering light by the roadside. Usually, no one stops in places like this. There aren't even mushroom pickers here, just swamps all around. I slowed down. As I got closer, an old rusty Neva, its hazard lights on, but they were flickering weakly. The battery was probably dying. And next to the hood, which was propped open, stood a man. A regular guy in a padded jacket and an Ushanka hat, too warm for the weather. His hands were covered in oil up to the elbows, fiddling with the engine. Stop, think, nighttime, in the forest, alone. The golden rule, never stop. But that hazard light, it looked so pitiful. I drove about 20 meters, glanced in the rearview mirror. The guy just stood there, watching me drive away. His arms dropped to his sides. I swore and hit the brakes. I reversed back. "Need help?" I shouted, lowering the window. The guy approached. His face was ordinary, grey, tired. His eyes were deeply set, almost invisible in the light of my headlights. "Thanks, son." His voice creaked like an unoiled door. "Looks like the alternator's gone. Do you have any wire or electrical tape?" "Just a little bit, enough to get me home." I nodded. I always had a toolbox and all sorts of junk in my trunk. I got out of the car. The air was damp, cold, smelling of silt and rotten leaves. The silence was ringing. I opened the trunk, started rummaging in the box, found a roll of tape and a piece of wire. "Here you go," I said, holding it out to him. The guy took them, turned them over in his hands, and suddenly said, "Are you okay yourself? Nothing hurts?" A strange question for a nighttime forest. "Not really, no," I answered, already backing towards the driver's door. "Good luck." "Good luck to you too," the guy said, and without looking back, walked to his Neva. I got in the car, exhaled, and drove on. About 500 meters later, I looked in the mirror. The Neva's headlights were off, and the hazard lights were off too. Just a dark hulk standing in the middle of the road. Strange, I thought. Maybe he got it started? I didn't think about it anymore. I nodded off, smoked, listened to the static, I entered our city well after midnight, collapsed into bed at home, and in the morning my phone rang. It was work, asking why I wasn't there. How could I not be? Today was Saturday, my day off. Sergey, what's wrong? What's Saturday? Today is Wednesday. We haven't heard from you in 3 days. I didn't understand anything. I looked at my phone. Wednesday. Turned on my computer. Wednesday. 3 days? That's impossible. I left on Monday night. I got home early Tuesday morning. Or did I? Then a second call. The wife of the client from Glubokoi, that last one. Sergey Ivanovich, sorry to bother you. When you left us, did you check your things? My husband probably put a jar of jam in your trunk. I think it was glass. I hope it didn't break. I went down to the garage, opened the trunk. The jar was intact, wrapped in newspaper. I unwrapped it. The newspaper was dated yesterday, Tuesday, and lying on top of the jar was a piece of wire and a roll of blue electrical tape. The very same ones I had given to the guy on the highway. And then I remembered his question. Are you okay yourself? Nothing hurts? I sat down at my computer and accessed the regional traffic police database. Through some acquaintances, I checked that section of the road, found the reports from the last 5 years. An accident at the 143rd kilometre, a collision between a Niva and a timber truck. The driver of the Niva, a resident of the village of Kliuchi, died at the scene. The date? The date was exactly 5 years ago, to the very day of that night when I stopped to help. The time of the accident matched the time I was passing through that area. I don't know what that was. Maybe just a coincidence. Maybe I was really tired back then and fell asleep at the wheel and woke up 3 days later in the garage. But the wire and the tape are still in my toolbox to this day. I never threw them out. And I never stop at night on the highway to help anyone anymore. When I was 17, I got my provisional license and started to learn to drive like most people my age. I was doing driving lessons, but outside of that, I would often go out driving with my dad. My dad works quite late, so this meant it was usually dark by the time we'd go out. One night we were out to drive as normal. It was a cold, wet winter night in January, and there weren't many cars on the road. My dad suggested that we go to the village where he grew up, as it is on a hill, and there are lots of steep roads I can practice hill starts on. After driving about the village for an hour or so, we decided to go home. When you exit this village, there are 2 roads. One goes back home and the other a country road. I asked my dad, where does that road go? He tells me it's an old country road, but it also takes us back home. We decided to take that road out of curiosity. My dad claimed to know the road from his childhood. However, it was pitch black. With the car's full beam on, you can barely see in front of you, and you cannot see what's beside you or behind you. There is no light or any other form of civilization for miles. As I'm driving along this road, I see owls, foxes, deer, usual Scottish wildlife. I've been driving along this road for what felt like hours at this point, and I had this feeling I wasn't anywhere near home. I finally decided to stop and turn back, but this road was a single lane with ditches at each side, so I had to find a spot wide enough to turn round. I keep driving on. The time is around 11:30ish at this point, and I'm starting to feel very tired. We come down a steep, windy road, and turn round a sharp corner to find a wider bit of road where I could turn. Behind this, about 20 yards from the road, was an old cottage. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. It had no windows or door and was covered in bushes and ivy. This creeped me out, but I was more interested in turning round and getting home. As I'm turning round, the headlights shine into the windows of the cottage. I see what looks like a tall, dark figure inside. In the brief few seconds the lights were on the house, I pass it off as my mind playing tricks on me, as I was already creeped out at this point. I turn the car round and facing back the way when I stall the car. This wasn't unusual for me, as I'd been learning to drive for a few months at this point, and often stalled the car when I was going slow. I try to restart the engine, but the key doesn't seem to fit into the lock. I keep trying, and it's still not going in. My dad is trying to help me, and it finally works. I turn the key. The headlights flash on, and I see the same figure standing in the middle of the road. It seemed to be man wearing a gas mask and long raincoat. The raincoat was covered in mud and moss. He stood and stared at me. I was in such shock I couldn't react. I didn't know what to do, so I honked the horn, and the figure darted off into the tress on the left side of the road. "What are you honking for?" my dad says. I floor the gas. "Did you not see that?" I say. "See what he says." We both go silent, and I drive as fast as I possibly can away from the cottage. We finally get off this country road and are back in civilization. I am driving along the road into the village I live in, and I see this BMW coming towards me. The car appears to be coming into my side of the road, so I slow down. There is a car park for the woodland trails on the left, so I assume they're going in there, but just not indicating. However, this car does not go into the car park. It keeps heading towards me on my side of the road. I've slowed down to pretty much a halt at this point, and at the last minute the car swerves back onto their side of the road. I look in my rear view mirror when I see a gas mask. The figure was in the back seat. I look back at the mirror and it's gone. My dad asks me why I slowed down. I couldn't explain what just happened. All I know is there was no car. I finally get home safe and sound. I was driving at about 1 to 2 a.m, coming home from a board game night at a friend's place that had run really late. They lived in a rural area, so it was a long and lonely drive home. I was alone in my car. There were 3 odd things that happened in quick succession. The first is that I drove into a very heavy bank of fog. The fog wasn't even that uncommon in the area, but only in the mornings and never after midnight. This area wasn't close to the ocean or something, and there was no wind, so it couldn't have been blown from somewhere else. Weird, but not unexplainable or scary. I reduced my speed so the car was only doing 40 or so and continued on. Eventually, I drove out of it. The second was that I came upon a huge tree that was on fire. Completely engulfed, had to be at least 3 stories tall. It was a fair way from the road, and there was nobody I could see around it. Sometimes people burn out old trees, but why would they do it at 2 a.m? There had been no storm, so it couldn't have been a lightning strike. The weirdest thing about it was that it felt strange looking at it, like it was some kind of portent or omen. I'm not a religious or superstitious person, but looking at this tree, I can't even explain the feeling. Like something important was happening or coming. But on I drove. Then I came upon a section of the road that was undergoing maintenance. It's not unusual to see crews working on roads all hours of the night, but in this case there was no crew. I slowed down and stopped because there was a sign up saying to wait for directions. There were half a dozen trucks with lights flashing, windows down. One of those small bobcat things with a scoop on the front, like a miniature bulldozer. Even a radio playing somewhere, even though I couldn't see it. The scene is burned into my brain 5 years later. The song American Pie was playing on the radio, and suddenly I was afraid, more afraid than I had ever been before or since. I have been bitten by a deadly snake miles from help, had a gun pointed at me by a schizophrenic, seen my sister nearly fall off a cliff, but never in my life have I been as afraid as I was in that moment. It was like I was actually having trouble catching my breath. It was flat ground in every direction. Even if these dozens of men had decided to hide as some sort of prank, there was nowhere for them to go. Then suddenly the song kind of skipped on the lyrics. The jester stole his thorny crown, except it wasn't like the same section of the song was just playing again. It was more like time was skipping. I don't even know how to explain this. I suddenly realized that something terrible was about to happen to me. Probably the same thing that had happened to the road crew. So I punched the gas, foot straight to the floor. For 2 long seconds nothing happened. The car didn't even move despite being in drive with the engine running. Then suddenly the acceleration started and I was pushed back in my seat, almost sideswiping some of the trucks. I drove at an unsafe speed for about another 15 minutes and the feeling of danger was gone. Then I pulled over and cried my eyes out. I was actually obsessed about it for years afterwards. The weather reports didn't record any fog, and I posted to Facebook groups in the area asking if anyone else had seen it, but nobody said they had. I drove the route a week later in daylight, looking for the charred remains of the tree, but could never find anything. Even if it had burnt to the ground, there still should have been a patch of dead grass. I called up the Department of Main Roads and asked them how long the work on that particular stretch of road would be continuing, only to have them tell me that the last maintenance they had done on that area has been 7 years ago and not in the section I described. When I went back to look for the tree, I could see no evidence of any fresh repairs. In fact, there were several potholes, and that is usually the first thing fixed.